This is a bit of a serious story now. So who is Mumia Abu-Jamal? Many of you probably already know, but just like a lot of people are fighting to free Assange, a lot of people are also fighting to free Mumia Abu-Jamal. And so Mumia Abu-Jamal was a journalist, is a journalist. He's still alive. It says Mumia Abu-Jamal is an internationally celebrated Black writer and radio journalist, author of 6 books and hundreds of columns and articles, organizer and inspiration for the prison lawyers movement, former member of the Black Panther Party, and supporter of Philadelphia's Radical Move organization. By the way, back in the 80s, the government actually bombed West Philly, where my family is from, to get to the people in the Move organization. So just to let you guys know. So yes, in the 80s, the United States bombed their own civilians on our own soil. It says, who has spent the last 30 years in prison, almost all of it in solitary confinement, which is torture, by the way, on Pennsylvania's death row. His demand for a new trial and freedom is supported by heads of state and prominent politicians worldwide from France, Africa, the Caribbean, Latin America, and elsewhere. Nobel laureates Nelson Mandela, Toni Morrison, and Bishop Desmond Tutu. The European and Japanese parliaments, city governments from San Francisco to Detroit to Paris and its suburbs, distinguished human rights organizations such as Amnesty International, the Congressional Black Caucus, and other members of the U.S. Congress, prominent civil rights groups such as the NAACP, which I'm looking at them with a side eye because they be doing some stuff with corporations and that I am just not game with, but it's whatever. And then numerous labor unions such as, doesn't say numerous labor unions, and by scholars, religious leaders, artists, scientists, countless others who cherish democracy, human rights, and justice. And so as Mumia Abu-Jamal was tried, convicted, and sentenced to death in 1982 for the murder of Philadelphia police officer Daniel Faulkner, an incident which took place on December 9th, 1981. For the next 30 years, Mumia was held in isolation on death row. He was kept there for over 10 years, even though a federal judge ordered his death sentence overturned in 2001. However, after losing numerous appeals to that order, the Philadelphia District Attorney on December 7, 2011, announced he was giving up his attempts to restore Mumia's death sentence. Mumia remains in prison under a sentence of life without parole. Amnesty International on the trial and post-trial environment. It says Mumia Abu-Jamal was sentenced to death for murder of a police officer in 1982 after a trial that failed to meet international standards. In this report, Amnesty International conducts a full analysis of the trial of Mumia Abu-Jamal, including the background and atmosphere prevailing in the city of Philadelphia in 1982 and the possible political influence that may have prevented him from receiving an impartial and fair hearing. That's from Amnesty International. Immortal Technique, the hip-hop artist, gave a commentary on Mumia Abu-Jamal. And the state claims that Philadelphia prosecutors argued and still claim that Mumia, driving a taxi down in Philadelphia, came across his brother who had been stopped by Officer Faulkner. Prosecutors further claimed that motivated by a long-standing hatred of police from his days in the Black Panthers and supporter of Move, Mumia ran to Faulkner and shot him in the back. Finally, they alleged that although wounded by a return shot from Faulkner, Mumia stood over the fallen police officer and shot him several times in the face. That's allegedly what the Mumia supporters believe happened at the crime scene. There is no dispute that Mumia was wounded as he approached the scene after Mumia was shot. However, the details are unclear. It is known that after police apprehended Mumia and while in transit to the hospital, he was beaten severely by the police. It is also clear from photographic and ballistic evidence, which has only recently come to light, that the state's version of what has happened cannot possibly be true. Moreover, many of those who believe in Mumia's innocence, claimed that that the most likely shooter was a fourth person at the scene, Kenneth Freeman, who was riding in Mumia's brother's car. At the trial, the presence of Freeman was known to the prosecution, but carefully concealed from the jury. Patrick O'Connor, in his book, The Framing of Mumia, offers the most reasoned account for this version of events. On the morning of the Move bombing, Kenneth Freeman's dead body was found naked and handcuffed. Many of Mumia's supporters believe that he was killed execution style by police who knew he, rather than Mumia, was the guilty party. Other defenders of Mumia have no unified theory of events, but nevertheless unite in viewing his 1982 trial as a mockery of justice and affirm Amnesty International's conclusion that justice would best be served by a new trial. So this is, I'm not going to read the entire thing, but this basically gives you a rundown. And, you know, this is, you know, really just going after Mumia because he's a journalist that really speaks on the things that the police, especially the Philadelphia police, just didn't like. There's one more piece that I want to because there was a piece that he actually went up against the police state in his journalism, and they didn't like that. So people like Mumia Abu-Jamal are deeply important to journalism. Just like Julian Assange is deeply important to journalism and free speech, Mumia Abu-Jamal is as well. He's being kept there really as a political prisoner because they do not want him to be released. I've seen recent pictures of him. He's not well. So that brings me to the article about him. That was just to give you guys some background. So this is from People's Dispatch. Make sure this is large enough. It says Mumia Abu-Jamal's appeal is denied. Abu-Jamal's bid for a new trial based on new evidence of racism and corruption within the prosecution has failed, leaving supporters with one less path for the decades-long political prisoner's freedom. So this came out a few days ago. It says despite an international high-profile campaign for his release, Mumia Abu-Jamal's appeal was denied by Philadelphia Judge Lucretia Clemens on Friday, March 31st. Abu-Jamal has spent over 40 years in prison, convicted of killing a police officer after being politically persecuted for his work as a journalist and a Black liberation fighter. The movement for his release has spanned decades and has grown to international levels with high-profile figures such as NUMSA General Secretary Irvin Jim counted among his supporters. As Angela Davis wrote in an open letter in February, on December 16th, a judge ruled that over 200 boxes of materials must be handed to Abu-Jamal's defense after previously unseen exculpatory evidence was mysteriously discovered in 2018. This evidence relates to Abu-Jamal's trial and includes documents that indicate that a witness was bribed for her testimony, that the prosecutor removed Black people from the jury for racial reasons, and that the prosecution offered leniency to one of their key witnesses for crimes she had been charged with. Based on this new evidence, Abu-Jamal's defense requested a new trial. This evidence was not available to the defense during their first trial. This could very well have affected the outcome. So it goes into racist jury selection. Evidence includes the trial's prosecutor's notes in which he tracked the race of each juror during jury selection. The trial prosecutor also wrote the template that he created to select jurors, which he applied unevenly to potential jurors based on race. Documents submitted by Abu-Jamal's defense indicate that the prosecutor, quote, deemed certain characteristics important for selecting jurors, but struck prospective black jurors who were more favorable with respect to those criteria than non-black panelists whom he did not strike, end quote. The prosecution hid those notes for over 35 years. Just imagine that you are trying to go, that you're going to trial and you claim your innocence. This is what people go through, especially a lot of black people. And so this is what's going on with Mumia Abu-Jamal. Not that much different than somebody like Julian Assange. I'm not saying that we shouldn't advocate for Julian Assange. I think we should. But we also should do so for Mumia Abu-Jamal as well, because they're both extremely important. Mumia Abu-Jamal was tortured. Solitary confinement. Solitary confinement is torture. They can call it by a different name. And in fact, I recommend all of you, I can't play it here because it's HBO, but John Oliver did a great piece on Last Week Tonight talking about solitary confinement and how terrible it is. I'm going to give a trigger warning. There is 20 seconds of video that they show of just hearing the men screaming and crying in solitary confinement because they are being tortured. It broke my heart. So this is what people like Mumia Abu-Jamal is going through in prison. They're breaking him and trying to kill him, allegedly. I have to be careful what I say on this show. Let's continue. Abu-Jamal supporters have pointed out to an official Philadelphia District Attorney's Office training tape from 1986 that revealed that the prosecutors were trained on how to strike black people from the jury without revealing racist intent in order to avoid a Batson challenge or a challenge to jury selection on racial grounds. And the infamous tape, senior prosecutor Jack McMahon is filmed telling his trainees, quote, "In selecting blacks to the jury, again, you don't want the real educated ones," end quote. The new evidence could have given Abu-Jamal his best chance at release after having endured medical neglect and torture during his decades-long stay in prison. Judge Lucretia Clemens dismissed Abu-Jamal's appeal largely on procedural grounds. As journalist and longtime Abu-Jamal supporter Noel Hanrahan wrote, quote, "Everyone in Philadelphia knows his trial judge, Judge Albert Sabo, was a stone-cold racist. Everyone knows that witnesses were bribed." Judge Lucretia Clemens stated that even if the jurors knew witnesses were bribed, it would have not affected their decision. Now, come on. Really? End quote. Abu-Jamal supporters vow to continue fighting despite the setback. So this is happening on American soil in the United States. And so this is, this is why independent media is so important. Because we need a slew of us. This is why when I bring people on, especially activists and independent journalists and citizen journalists, and I ask them about their perspective and how they got into this space, I want to encourage you to do the same. because we all need to keep speaking out. And you don't have to get on camera like me, right? You don't have to show your mug on camera like I do. You can, if you're a writer, be a writer, right? If you just want to use your voice on radio or just, make a podcast, do that. But for goodness sakes, please speak out. Tell the truth. Let people know what's really going on, because we cannot continue to let this happen. People like Julian Assange and Mumia Abu-Jamal, people like Chelsea Manning, people like Edward Snowden, people, oh my God, I'm forgetting his name. He was on house arrest. Sorry, I'm forgetting his name. But people like, him, they all are suffering at the hands of our state. And our state is working on behalf of the corporate dictators because they do not want to give up their power. They don't want people to have power. They don't want you or I to actually have power in this country. That's why it's important to discuss stories like this. So the links are also in the description as well for the case about Mumia Abu-Jamal. Please share. If you guys want to, you guys can share this stream. I know that Dr. Jared Ball from Black Power Media also talks at length about Mumia Abu-Jamal. Share them. Share Dr. Jared Ball's, commentary about Mumia Abu-Jamal as well. Because the thing is that his story also needs to get out. Stephen Donziger, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, Stephen Donziger as well. Yeah, because there's so many people who are constantly being attacked for telling the truth. You should not have to suffer for telling the truth. But yet, that's how it is in this country.